Hey everybody, this is Jason. You're listening to Cut for Time on the Embrace Church podcast. I'm so glad you clicked the button. You're here now. You're listening. It's going to be such a great talk we have today. We're going to be talking with Adam Weber, so it's always exciting to have him. Last time he was on the episode, we were outside, and it sounded like we were being taken through a tornado. But we're inside this time, and he's here with us today. If you don't know, Cut for Time, this is a podcast where we like to dive into our most recent message from a Sunday, and man, we just want to chat about it more. There's only so much time on a Sunday morning that the speakers get on stage in between worship and prayer and just awesome things that go on in the service. So we like to take time to be able to sit down with the speaker, chat about, man, what was cut for time from the message during the prep? And man, what was something that you wish you could have jumped into more, but just couldn't, and you went on to the next point? And so we get the opportunity to talk about that here today. And this past Sunday, we continued on week 4. We ended our series with week 4 of it. It was called This Letter is for You. And it's where we've been taking, each week, we've been jumping into a chapter of Colossians. It's just Colossians is it's a bunch of letters that this guy named Paul wrote for a church, and we've just been taking a chapter at a time as a church and talking about it. Taking away, underlining anything that grabs our attention, putting a question mark around things, starring our main takeaways, and that's what our speakers have been doing. So anyway, that's what Adam did this week, and so to segue into this, hey Adam, you're here with us today.
Oh, excited as always to do this. This is anybody who preaches a message on a Sunday knows that there's so many things that you wanted to say, but you just didn't have the time to do so.
Yes. It's like, what do I do with that?
Oh, it's and it's so painful. Every week we have a team that goes through the message, and the parts that get cut out, you just shed a tear over, because especially myself as a skeptic, I'm like, why didn't you talk about that verse? Why didn't you say that? Why didn't you mention that? And so I absolutely love this. I truly do. Even as someone who's listening, I haven't been preaching as regular just during the last month or so, and so it's been really cool for me to go listen to the episodes and to hear Brian, to hear Fink, to hear Waltner share, Walker, to hear them share about what got cut out of their message and to dive deeper. And so it's been good for me even on the listening end.
Man, it is an honor, and I love it so much. What I just took away from what you said there is I'm a tear collector. That's kind of what we get to do here. That should be the name of the podcast now.
Oh, exactly.
Tear collection.
Tear collector. Tear collector. You're the place that we can share our hopes and dreams with when they get shot down during the week.
It's a private conversation. That's the best
part. It's just between me and you, yeah.
But no, thanks for taking the time. It's an honor. I'm so excited to talk about week 4 of the series. You got Colossians chapter 4. So week 4 in the series. And what was your message about in that chapter?
Yeah. So chapter 4 is a great chapter. It's a short chapter. Half of it is just final instructions from Paul to specific people. So really verses 7 through 18, I got my Bible open here. It's just Paul giving final instructions to specific people, and also giving like final shout outs to his friends. He's like, hey, if you would, can you say hello to my buddy so-and-so, and just tell him, hey, man, I love you. And so I love that at the end, it's like
tagging him on the post.
Yeah, he's just tagging people and shouting out. So that's really 7 through 18. So really the heart of the chapter is really just only 6 verses long. So it's not a lot of verses, but there's a lot of powerful things.
Oh, sure.
I dug in. What I said I underlined. I underlined verses 5 and 6. I'm just going to read that quickly. Live wisely among those who are not believers, and make the most of every opportunity. Let your conversation be gracious and attractive, so that you will have the right response for everyone. So that's what I underlined, and I starred 2 different things. And really, basically what Paul is saying in those 2 verses before I talk about the 2 things is whenever you're around people who don't know Jesus, whenever there's when anyone around you doesn't know the Lord, do these 2 things. Do these 2 things. Whenever there's someone, he's given instructions on how to live and how to conduct yourself whenever you're around someone who does not know the Lord. So the first one that I mentioned was be attractive. Let your conversation be attractive and gracious. And so be attractive with your life, but more specifically with your words.
Yeah, make sure the hair's cut good. Make sure the makeup's on.
Yeah, Not physically attractive.
Oh,
but,
I'm taking that wrong. Okay,
yeah, exactly. Not physically attractive, but attractive in a way that's just so different. Attractive words are kind. They're considerate. Attractive words are focused on the other person. They ask questions. They genuinely care about another person. So they ask questions and then they listen. And just like a magnet, I kind of use the analogy of a magnet. A magnet either attracts or repels. That's really the two things it does. Yeah. And our words have the ability to do those two things too. And so using words that are attractive, not just to love another person, not just to gain more friends. Both of those things are awesome and honorable. But more than anything, ultimately to attract people to Jesus.
My favorite part about that point, about the be attractive point that you had there was attractive words. Like I thought to myself, well, how do I know if they're being attractive? It's focused on the other person.
Yeah.
I was like, whoa, like so simple, but that's so true. Cause I find when I'm not focusing on how attractive my words are, I'm just focusing on getting my point across or saying my thing a lot. And so to have that barometer, I'm like, oh, I'm going to start asking myself that more. I was thinking that like, okay, wow, am I focusing on the other person in this moment? Because that'll make you speak with so much more truth, but also so much more grace.
Yes.
And I've just never heard it put that way. So I thought that was cool.
And when you're focusing on another person, there's selflessness that takes over. Instead of even just talking about yourself, there's nothing more... I'm trying to struggle with the word unattractive than someone who's talking about themselves and their greatness and how wonderful they are. It's like, okay, gosh.
Okay. Hang on, I got to mark that out of the agenda for today.
Yeah, exactly. But when someone is truly focused on you, I mean, you're just drawn.
Yeah,
and
that's what Jesus did too, right? Like, man, that's powerful.
Yep, he met people right where they were, called them by name, and genuinely took an interest in them.
Man. And then so be attractive. Yeah, I love it. You made the joke like, man, I'm glad they let the expert on this talk about it here today.
It's not a coincidence. Yeah. There are no coincidences with God that I'm the one talking about being attractive. So,
and on that same note, what two better people better to recap it?
Exactly. This is from God. I feel like, I'm the bald, good-looking man, and you're the one with a full head of hair. And so
if we had our wives on right now, they'd be saying the same thing. You know, the expert. Okay.
Yeah, maybe the opposite. Maybe the opposite.
So that first point was be attractive, and then your second point in the message was be proactive.
Be proactive.
Yeah.
In verse 5, make the most of every opportunity. Live wisely among those who are not believers and make the most of every opportunity. Be proactive. I think a lot of times we just mindlessly go throughout a day. We're focused on ourselves instead of realizing the opportunity that we have with every single person that we cross paths with. We get in our own little agenda, our own little world. We're worried about things. We're focused on things. And so often we interact with people not even realizing they're a human with a soul, not a robot. And something begins to change when we really be proactive, when we make the most of every opportunity. And I love just even thinking about it. It just came out. I wasn't even planning on saying this weekend, but hey, if you're not a follower of Jesus, you can do whatever you want to. But Paul's like, hey, if you follow Jesus, it's actually not optional. You actually have to make the most of every opportunity. And so
that's good.
Whether you're a teacher, a nurse, maybe you're a doctor, or you're a really important business person, God's like, that's awesome, but still, I'm actually going to kind of challenge you to get out of your little agenda and focus on the person who's right in front of you. And that's maybe an act, like a challenging thing for me. If there's something, an action that I feel like is below me, or someone that I feel like is below me, I would challenge all of us. That's the person we need to interact with. That's the action God is wanting us to do, because we're not above anything or anyone.
Yeah. What do you think between the two? So even personally for you, I'll ask you, like, what's the hardest between those two? Like being attractive or being proactive, those 2 points. What's the hardest for you, or do you think for people in general?
So this is probably a strong, something that comes naturally for me. To be attractive and proactive. I don't know why. I just have a curiosity of life, and I have a curiosity of people, and so the stranger you are, the more I want to know your story. And so
if you've met Adam for any moment of time, you know this is like, oh yeah, there are people nodding their heads right now. Yes, this is
naturally like something that I genuinely enjoy doing, and find joy, like just find joy and peace. in those moments, I feel like God ministers to me. And something I struggle with is living this out with the people who are closest to me.
Oh, sure.
So that's where I struggle, specifically with the team around me. Like sometimes I'm not attractive with my words with those who are closest in my life because I care so much about others.
Yeah.
Sometimes the people who are closest to me become robots.
Sometimes I get that. You feel more comfortable too,
yes,
right? So there's kind of that bar starts to lower for some reason.
Yep. Yeah. And I've always had a heart for the outsider.
Yeah.
So whether it's someone who's bringing our meal at a restaurant, a cashier, for a single mom, whatever it is, for some reason I always gravitate to that person.
Yep.
But even though it's a stronger suit for me, and there's so many areas I'm not a strong suit. Again, it's easy to get in my ruts. Like if I'm tired, if I'm stressed, if I have a lot in my calendar on any given day, then it's easy for me to not be proactive because I'm just tired. I'm focused on myself, blah, blah, blah. But in those moments, that's when I need to do it the most, not just for the other person, but for me.
Well, the image comes to me, and I'll be just open on here because I know this won't get posted anywhere. Like for me, it's like my family gets the brunt of that sometimes. Like they get the last little bit of me when I come home from a day or running around or anything. Come home, and it's like you're so right. Like that's when my radar needs to be even more on. More. Like I need to think about how can I be attractive for my wife, But no, seriously, she's going to hate that. How can I be attractive? But like we said before, attractive words are focused on the other person. How can I be focused on her, when I get home? How can I be focused on my kids so I'm saying the right things and intentional things and consistently? And then how can I be proactive with them? It's just like, that's super convicting.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, it's something even in the last year and a half, I've really... I feel like I've seen a lot of growth. Thank God that's him, not me. But just being more attractive with my words with my wife and kids, specifically with my kids. It comes more naturally with my wife.
Yeah.
But sometimes for me, it doesn't come more naturally with my kids. I'm tired after a long day, blah, blah, blah. But even last night, it was cool. I don't know what it was, but God just like, hey, when you get home, I know you're tired. I know you've had a long day, and then you preached last night. But when you get home, you got 45 minutes with your kids before they go to sleep. Make it awesome. And so it was just fun. I called and I'm like, hey, Beck, can you tell Grayson, my daughter, like when we get home, we're going to do this together. And so when I pulled in, she was out in my lawn, like,
oh my gosh,
just jumping up and down. Yeah. And it was awesome. And all four of my kids ended up coming outside and we just had a wonderful,
and it was like a simple step, but it means the world.
It did. Yeah. And it also was life-giving to me. Wow. Sometimes those moments, they seem like work. It's like, I don't want to listen to this person. I don't want to do anything for anybody except myself. And God just is like, no, I want something for you too. Like, I'm going to minister to you in this as well. And you're going to have your love for me stoked, like the flames.
I'll do that.
Yes, I'll do
God's
that.
Like, I'll do that.
Yep. Yeah. Instead of just kind of doing your thing, going and collapsing on a couch. And sometimes we need rest, so I'm not saying that either. But oftentimes God's like, hey, I have something for you too.
You talked about in your message of turning a pizza villa into a place of worship. You guys are I don't want to fan your flame because I know you hate that, but like you guys were on vacation. You recently just did the craziest road trip with all your kids, and it's amazing that you're here today, still alive. No, it went. But you talked about it went great, and it's just tell us a little bit of a recap of that story of you going in that pizza villa and what that illustration was.
Yeah, well, actually, if I can, I'm gonna. You can kind of hear that story in the message.
Yeah.
There was another example recently, and again, this is all God, not me. Like I mean that. If you've spent 5 minutes with me, you know that I'm so far from perfect. Another example of something just God was just like, be proactive and attractive. So we were walking. Hudson and I were walking. It was, I think it was Friday night. Yeah, it was Friday night. We were walking downtown Sioux Falls, and in the middle of the road, when we crossed the road, there was a debit card on the street.
Whoa.
So I pick it up quick, and Hudson's like,
Cha-ching.
what are you going to do? Yeah, let's go shopping. But Hudson's like, what are you going to do with this? And I was like, well, let me see if I can find the person on Facebook. So I find the person on Facebook and I message them, and I know like if you're not friends, it goes to a trash bin. So I posted on a comment of the gals too, and I said, hey, I just sent you a direct message. So direct message, I said, hey, I found your debit card. And,
oh my gosh.
If I just know if I lost it, and I have in the past, I'd love to reconnect with it. So didn't hear anything for first thing in the morning. She messaged me, oh my gosh, thank you so much. And I said, no worries. And I said, how can I get it back to you? And she's like, well, I'm doing something right now. And Beck and I, we were headed out of town with the kids. So I said, hey, I'll leave it on my front porch. And she just said, thank you so much. Like, I can't believe you're doing this, yada, yada.
Wow.
So I thought that was the end of the story. And, just being proactive, trying to make the most of every opportunity.
Yeah.
I got in our vehicle. We were starting to pull away. And I remembered that I had a stack of Starbucks cards. Beck and I just had a little bit of extra money that we just wanted to bless people with. Yeah. So I turned mine into like 10 $5 Starbucks cards. So I was like, hey, just wait. And Beck's like, we're going to go. And I'm like, no, just wait. So I ran in, grabbed one, and I left her card on our bench on our front porch. And I put a Starbucks card on it as well.
Whoa.
And I messaged her back and said, hey, I left you a Starbucks card too. And she said that she had lost it in like 3 tweets, 3 messages earlier. She said that she was downtown and she went to an interview and she wondered where she lost her debit card. So I messaged her back and said, hey, I actually left you a Starbucks card. And I hope the interview went really, really well for you this week. And I hope whatever.
Man.
And she said, totally speechless, why are you doing this? And I just said, I just want, just hope to brighten your day. It was so cool. Randomly, my daughter earlier than the day before had done some sidewalk chalk, and I had written like a week ago, "God heart you, God loves you."
Yep.
Well, it had all rinsed off from a storm. She had written it on our sidewalk as well.
Oh, God hearts you. Yeah.
And so when the lady came up to our house, her son saw that, and then she got her debit card back along with a Starbucks card.
Oh, my gosh.
And she said, hey, I saw the message on your sidewalk, too. I'm not sure if that was for me or somebody else, but I just want to say, like, I can't believe this.
Wow.
And it just said, hey, just hope you have a wonderful day. That was actually my daughter who wrote that, and I just hope you have a wonderful day. And it was just something so simple.
So simple. You're right. Like,
and again, it was the prompting of like, gosh, we're ordering our van, but I just was like, go get the debit card or the Starbucks card really quick. So I like literally sprinted to my house, grabbed it out of my pocket, put it there. It was something so simple, but I was like, how can we go just a little bit above just getting the card back?
And I think we all, like, thanks for sharing that. That is just, man, I was like, my eyes started to water. I got something in them towards the end. I was just like, it's just amazing to see. We all sometimes get those little promptings.
Yes.
Like, you just feel it in you. I can't really explain it, but you just feel it in you. And like, that literally probably minute and a half it took you to run inside, get it, adjust your van time, adjust your day, just a hair to do that. Those steps you took, I guarantee more mountains were moved in her heart, in her mind, encouragement that day, and even your intentional prayer. More mountains were moved in that than the obstruction it caused in your day.
Yes.
And so to think of those baby steps that we sometimes think are mountains, but man, if we just take that tiny step of proactivity, man, that story is just amazing. I'm just like getting kind of emotional just thinking about even the glimpse of life change she got to see or experience that day. It's just, wow. It's just phenomenal.
And again, this isn't a pat me on the back moment at all. Like,
what's cool about it is it's so simple.
It's simple.
It's not like you had this extra gift or, it's a small
special
gift
thing that no one else can do. It's like, no, this is really simple stuff.
Yeah, and that's what's beautiful about it.
What I'm beginning to realize in my own life is those small nudges, when we sense them, oftentimes we're like, gosh, I want to press in further to the heart of God, or we'll use the word deeper.
Yeah.
And so we'll do this or that, and all those things are wonderful. But what I'm beginning to realize is every time we say yes to that small little nudge, our ears become more in tune with the voice of God. Every single time we say yes, we begin to hear God's voice a little bit clearer, not just in doing actions for other people, but we begin to hear God's voice a little bit clearer in our marriage. we get to hear God's voice a little bit clearer in a disagreement with somebody and how to heal that. We hear his voice a little bit clearer with what to say to our kids or our friend who's struggling. We just get just a little bit clearer. Wow. And also God softens our heart just a little bit more, and we become just a little bit more available. And I think that's when God really begins to do something sweet, is when we listen to that small promptings, those little opportunities Paul talks about to be proactive. That's when God really begins to move, not just through our lives, but in us, in our soul. And like, he just begins to reprogram how we function.
I almost imagine we talked a couple podcasts ago about how some people have a problem with Paul and just the way he writes, and he's very straightforward, truthful. And I would never say this, but I just heard murmurings of people saying he thinks he knows it all. You know what I mean? He kind of does. He made it in the Bible. But what I'm getting to is he says so much in these 4 chapters, in these 4 letters, that I'm like, man, this letter's for me. That's a lot. But he ends it on this 4th one, it being even the shortest, of this heartbeat of man, okay, if you didn't catch any of that, I don't know if this was his mindset, if you didn't catch any of that, man, this step of thinking of someone else, of just taking that small step towards someone else's needs or thoughts, the baby step of that makes the kingdom impact. Yep. That's just the step I need you to remember. Yep. Think of others. Let that be your jumping off point.
Yep.
If despite anything else you get, you'll get there, but just think of others. You don't need to have an extra qualification to think of others.
And even those, more specifically, those who don't know Jesus.
Yes.
And I see the same heart in Jesus himself when he talks about 99 sheep and one lost. Just that, hey, final closing. Man, that one, God has just got a heart for.
Because you saw a Starbucks card that you left, but she saw Jesus,
Well, hopefully. I hope so, yeah.
You know what I mean? That's really what it boils down to.
Yeah.
Man. Well, thanks for that. And the message, again, check it out if you have time. Seriously, is the podcast right before this one, part 4 of our This Letter Is For You series called Attractive and Proactive. You can find it at IamEmbrace.com. But I wanted to jump into now, you even said it at the beginning of your message, man, there's even more in the scripture that he talks about that I had to cut out a pretty decent chunk that you had already even man, I'm thankful to even be able to come on the podcast and talk about it. So what was cut from your message that you mentioned?
Yeah, well, there was a couple different things cut out. I think verse 2, even devote yourselves to prayer with an alert mind and a thankful heart. I just think there's so much even in that. I'm like, wow, again, that's kind of that final word and final encouragement from Paul. I just think there's a lot you can dig into that.
Yeah.
But just remind us, parts of the Bible can be just really hard to understand and confusing.
Oh, totally.
And this letter written to the church in Colossae, or however you want to
say it.
Colossae, yeah, was written in a completely different time to a completely different culture, to a people that in so many ways are completely different from us.
Yeah, sure.
And so when we read through the Bible and when we look at the book of Colossians, there might be parts that are hard to understand and other parts that just seem plain wrong. It just seemed like, what is that about? Will you agree with this? In one of those parts, and this is what got cut from the message, and literally a page and a half got cut, was verse 1. So verse 1 says this. It says, "Masters, be just and fair to your slaves. Remember that you also have a master in heaven." So just, kind of hard stop after reading that verse.
Sure.
Obviously, this is where I put my question mark when I read through Colossians. And I can remember first reading through the Bible as a whole. I did so as a freshman in college at Augustana, a place that was really great for asking questions. I mean, they weren't hesitant to ask questions. So even more so in that season, well, I can remember reading through, and the skeptic in me just wanted to say, see, this is where the Bible's messed up. This is where it's so backwards and outdated. More specifically, now, I wasn't then, but now as a dad of an African-American son, why would we ever listen to a book that condones slavery?
Yeah.
Whether it's this verse or so many other verses, it's like, why would you ever listen to this book? And yet, once more, to remember, this letter was originally written for a church roughly 2,000 years ago. So it may sound outdated and backwards for us. And yet, here's the part that you might not know in first glance. it was actually revolutionary for its time. 2,000 years ago, these words would have been revolutionary, even in our country, just 150 years ago, not 2,000 years ago, but 150 years ago in this country, it would have been revolutionary. Again, like the people originally hearing this, and I'm saying this again as someone who's got an African-American son, the people originally hearing this would have said, why would you ever be just or fair to a piece of property? I mean, the listener would have been like, I am not just or fair with my horse or with my cow. Why would I ever be just or fair? Paul's words would have been shocking. The opposite reason that they're now shocking to us. Paul's basically saying your slave is a person, a human being. They're a brother or sister, not property. And then he says in the very next part, and let me remind you, you have a master in heaven who is God.
Oh, man.
And so you might want to treat these people, not property, you might want to treat these people really, really well. And so kind of having that background, it changes everything for us, but 10 times more, it changed everything for the original listener of like, whoa, they're not property, they're people.
It goes against everything they were raised to think.
Yeah, so culture. Another thing, like here's just kind of more backstory on things. When we think slavery here in the United States, we look at our history here, we think racial slavery, where Travis Walton, our T campus pastor, we had a conversation about this actually before even recording.
Yeah.
He said in the Roman culture, there was all kinds of different forms of slavery. And to his understanding, there was basically none that was kind of tied racially. It was more economically different. So how we even read it through our lens now, we think racially, as someone, again, with an African-American son, I get defensive right away. When Paul's original listeners, they would have not had that come to mind. And so even that difference of that. But again, Paul is really turning the tables. He's not condoning slavery in any way. I mean, there's in any way, he's actually, again, being very revolutionary to say, hey, you got this current system in Roman culture that treats people like property, and I'm just going to turn this completely upside down and say they are not property, they are people. They're brothers and sisters. Again, and let me remind you, you have a master in heaven who
loves you.
Yeah, who is God, who loves you, and also a God that you will stand before someday.
Man.
And so you might want to treat these people,
how
not
terrified,
property,
if you were in Paul's shoes to give that message to a culture that it's unheard of, that's terrifying.
Yeah, I mean, it would have been it would have been hard to hear.
Yeah.
It would have been hard. It would have been like, that's not how I've been living or how my family's lived or my family before that's lived. And so I think, again, for me, the skeptic, I'm such a naturally skeptic heart. For me, when I come to places like that in the Bible, as a new Christian even, before becoming a Christian, it's the reason I wanted nothing to do with God. I felt there were so many inconsistencies. But even as a new Christian, I really began to stumble with those things. My hope is that when you come across a text like that, maybe verse 1 of chapter 4 in Colossians, or another one, hopefully it prompts you to ask a question.
Yeah.
Just like we said, to put a question mark by something that you don't understand or you want to explore more fully. And that's a perfect example of it'd be so easy to read that and totally walk away rather than saying, gosh, this letter originally was written for a church that existed 2,000 years ago. I want to know more about this church. I want to know more about like what he's speaking into instead of just writing it off and walking away.
That's that beautiful part about, and even why when the series was being planned and just prayed over and stuff, like including that question mark language into it, because it's like there's this like taboo about like, no, if I have a question about it, that means I'm lacking in faith, or like I have a question about it, it means I must not believe it, where God's like, and we've said this before, like God's like, no, ask me the questions.
Yep.
Ask me. Throw those up to me. Ask those around you, your brothers and sisters in Christ. Like, that is okay. More than that is okay. That's what I want you to do.
Yes.
Right? Like, to get to know my wife, there are question marks that we have in our relationship all the time.
Yeah.
But we ask them, we bring them up, and that's just, that's so reassuring.
And that's healthy to do that. And I totally agree. I think so often it's like you can't ask questions. You can't have, You can't put a question mark in your Bible. And yet, God, he loves when we bring our questions, even our doubts to him and say, hey, I'm really wrestling with this, God. I don't know why this is happening. I don't know why my dad's going through this hard health thing. And I don't understand this verse in Colossians 4, verse 1, to be able to bring those things and say, hey, God, help me to understand what are you trying to say here.
Man. And so along still sticking with what was cut for time, outside of being attractive and being proactive in the verses you covered, was there anything else that was kind of like, man, I could go another direction totally?
Well, I mentioned in the message, but something just that I've wrestled with I think the church is constantly wrestling with is the word attractive can be like a curse word in some circles.
Yeah.
And it just can be wrong, like to be attractive. And when it's like, no, like, gosh, I hope every part of us should be attractive.
Oh, yeah.
And that doesn't mean watering things down, but your life should attract other people. It's God's kindness that brings us back to him, not his anger or his wrath or even his justice. Like, it's his kindness that brings us back to him. And so I think in some circles, it's like the more miserable we are and the more intense we are, and sometimes the more angry we are, the more holy we are, the more we love Jesus. And I'm like, gosh, that sounds more like Pharisees than the people who hung out with Jesus. Because I think they were the intense ones saying, we fast on this day and you're healing people on this day. We're really intense and kind of angry and critical about it. Where Jesus is like,
we have the joy of the Lord. And you're like, I don't know.
Yeah, you don't seem like you have the joy. You don't seem like you have the joy of the Lord. And so I think that's part that that really resonated with me and something that I'm just continuing to really pray about and wrestle through. Like, what does it mean for a church to be attractive? What does it mean for a person to be attractive, their words to be attractive? Gosh, I hope that I'm attractive as far as the Jesus inside of me. And it's interesting. I sat down. I was sitting on a street corner a couple of weeks ago, actually last week.
As one does.
Yeah, I was sitting on a street corner, and there was a Catholic fellow who sat down, a guy that I've known, great guy, and we started talking about differences, and he started saying, like, man, I like, some church buildings aren't attractive at all, and like, man, we get to show like the greatness of God in stained glass windows, and it really just like kind of frustrated him that when buildings aren't beautiful. Whoa. And I said, wow, I feel the same way about messages and about like music done. Because he said, like, if you have a church, it should be done to the best of its ability. It should be gorgeous. Whoa. It should show the majesty and power of God. Wow. And I was like, whoa, man, we're like really similar, but just different. I feel that way about messages and given a message that I'm putting this in quotes, in Paul's words, attractive, a service that's attractive, like greeting that's attractive. And he's like, wow. Yeah. And we're actually more similar than I would have thought.
Whoa, that's
crazy.
And
it was really kind of this cool moment. I'm like, we are. We value different things. But that's okay. Yeah. And I think so often the church, again, we get in our own little ruts. It's like, well, you're wrong or I'm wrong. No, how about we both like are displaying a part of the heart of God. And man, how you do it is so cool. Like now I understand why the cathedral on the hill is the way it is, because it does show the greatness of God.
I've literally never thought about that until just now. Like, which might sound dumb, but it's like that makes a great point. Like the attractiveness, and it's not the attractiveness so much that's the issue as it is the heart behind it.
The heart behind it.
Yeah, that's man, that is cool.
And it just gave me a new appreciation even for Catholic churches. I'm like, man, whoa. In Notre Dame, when it burned down,
Notre Dame, no,
Notre
Dame,
Dame. But when that burned down, when that burnt down, it was such a big deal because for a lot of Catholics, man, it's displaying the majesty of God.
Yep.
And for me, sometimes when I feel like a message just feels like it was thrown together and uncaring and everybody's falling asleep, that's the same feeling I get of like, you're putting us to sleep talking about the greatest news that's ever been told. Man. Oh my gosh, it just feels wrong. And instead of seeing that as you're wrong or he's wrong or she's wrong, it's like, no, isn't it cool how God displays this differently through different people? I think that's really, really cool. Yeah. That's kind of a random thing, but I just thought about that. I'm like, that's really, really cool.
That really expands on that attractive point. And it really, again, drives home the same point of like, so that whole thing we just talked about with the buildings or message, it's you feel that way because you're thinking about how the other person will perceive it.
The other person.
I'm like, it all goes back to it.
Yep.
Wow, how cool.
Yep. Because for me, buildings is not something I get excited. I want to use them well, and I hope they're like even in the cleanliness. Sure. I hope people realize like, wow, they actually are prepared for me coming.
Sure.
Like the kids area is clean. They're like expecting kids to come, and they want to make sure the kids have a great experience, and parents feel comfortable leaving their kids. So buildings, I'm like, but that's not what I get excited about.
Sure.
I get excited about, people in a message meeting Jesus for the first time and seeing that. And so it's just kind of cool.
Man, thanks for sharing that. That's awesome. So this was, like I said before, week 4. You closed it out. It was the last part, and we have a new series starting next week. We'll talk a little bit about it in a bit. But man, we're at the end of a series, end of your message. Give me some overall thoughts of the series as a whole, man. What would you hope for? And you kind of touched on it at the end of your message a little bit, but like, what would be your hope for somebody taking away this series? A lot of times we go through a series and we're following along with it a lot, but sometimes people hear maybe 1 or 2 of the message.
Yep.
And we kind of. Our hope is always that, man, people would come to know Jesus more, take their next step with him. Yep. And hearing these messages as a whole, I hope are a tool for you. And there's always a combined thought that it's like, man, I want to live differently now. Yep. But for those who didn't get to combine that or kind of see the whole heart all the way through, like what sticks out in your head with that?
A couple things. First off, I think it's really cool. It was a different person who spoke each week.
It was. We don't always get that.
We don't. Yeah. A lot of times it's myself for a group, or it's myself plus one of the other campus pastors. But it was a different voice each time. And even in the meeting when we planned it out, each chapter there was different things that people underlined and question marked and starred.
And you're like, oh, I would have never underlined that.
Yeah. Would have never underlined that, or that would have stuck out to me. And so for me, that's really, really cool how God keeps speaking. And even in myself, when I come back to the book of Colossians, next time I read it in 6 months or whatever, it's going to say something different to me.
Yeah,
and so there'll be different things that I star. And so I think that's pretty cool. Like, that's exciting for me. You don't just read through the Bible one time and, oh man, I'm done. Like, that's finished. Instead, we're told the word is living and active. Yes. And so it's alive. And so it comes alive. So that's kind of cool. That I thought that was really neat to be able to see that through the different voices. Overall, though, our heartbeat with this series was to encourage people to begin opening up the Bible on their own. To look at the words from Paul, to look at the words from John and Matthew and Mark, to begin to open them up and feel like they have at least three tools that they can use when reading. Okay, so I'm going to read this chapter. I always tell people, don't try to read through the entire Bible in one setting. Good, if you want to, go for it. But one chapter a day. Start with one of the Gospels: Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John. Yeah. Read one chapter a day before you open up. God, would you just please speak to me? Yeah. I'm a Yahoo who's doesn't understand everything. So would you speak in a way that I can understand? Read that chapter. What stuck out to you? Okay, I'm going to underline those 2 things. What did you have a question mark about? Like, man, I didn't understand that, so I'm going to do a quick search. What's wonderful is there's so many commentaries. Commentaries are books that dive deeper into the different things, into the different verses.
They comment on what's being said.
Yeah, in the past, you had to buy, I have them on my bookshelf. You'd have to buy a $60 book for the book of Mark, a $60 book for the book of Colossians. Yeah. Now you can do a quick web search, they come up with them. And so, gosh, what does this mean? What does Colossians 4 have to say? 4 verse 1. I'm going to type that in and search it a few places. Man, John Wesley's commentary says this. This commentary says that. Man, that's pretty cool. So underline things that stick out, put a question mark, and also, again, we just talked, when you come across a verse like Colossians 4:1, instead of walking away, man, I want to know more about what the context is. I want to know more about the background is. And then what's the simple takeaway?
Man.
And if we can begin to do that each day, or on a regular, consistent basis, God's going to begin to move. And my hope is that when we're a new Christian, yes, it does rely on other people. Like, you're brand new, so you're learning how to walk and you're learning to talk and how to eat. But hopefully, in 6 months of following Jesus, all of a sudden it's like, man, I don't need that every single week because I'm already doing it in my own walk. And I'm no longer dependent on the pastor one time a week to feed me, which I can't imagine if I tried to eat only one time a week. Even if it was the best meal,
the biggest meal.
Yeah, all meat and potatoes, I would still be dying 48 hours into the week.
That's your idea of like the best meal? Just meat and potatoes?
Meat and potatoes, just like Carnival or whatever. I've only been there one time, but it was fantastic.
We went together.
We went together. It was amazing.
You did not pace yourself.
I did not pace myself. I tried to get my money's worth. But can you imagine if and so like I think our hope is this that man I know I'm going to start taking the ownership of this on me, and so now we're done with Colossians. Gosh, what am I going to go through now? Man, I've never read through the book of John before. Let's do it. I can do it. I got these 3 tools, and I can do it. Or I've never been through Psalms before. Man, I can do this. So that's the overall hope.
My favorite part was even in it. It's kind of why we named the series what it was. Like, this letter is for you. The meaning totally gets taken away when you look at it as this is a book that has chapters in it called Scriptures, and I must read Scripture, right? There's no heart, and it's hard to even like take it in. But when you're like, no, this is a letter through Paul from God, right? And it's just like,
so good. So this is a verse I didn't even focus in on. This is the 2 verses at the very end of Colossians. So this is Colossians 4, verse 16.
Bring it.
After you have read this letter, pass it on to the church in Laodicea, or however you say that, so they too can read it. And you should read the letter I wrote to them.
That's it.
So like what's so cool, and I wish now that I would have put that in there actually, but what's so cool is these letters were originally written. So Paul wrote this letter to the Colossians, but most of these letters were instructed to hand on to other churches. Again, there's no internet. There's no like we're talking
Didn't
like
post it on Facebook.
There's no Facebook posts. There's no conference calls. There's no online services. So the only way to get this stuff from someone who actually met the risen Savior Jesus is through letters. And so they would have been handed on. And the hope was really to get that to like it's 2,000 years ago, and so guys, you got to make sure you understand who it was originally written for, so you can pull what you understand. But Embrace Church, this letter's for you,
man.
It went from the church it went from the Colossians to the church in Laodicea, and now it's being passed on to UT campus, to you St. Croix campus, to you Sertoma campus, 57th Street campus, anybody who's listening online, network churches, anyone who's listening to this podcast right now who's a follower of Jesus, even if you don't attend Embrace, this letter's for you.
It's for you. That's amazing. I wish we would have tied that in. No,
I know. I'm like, even reading it now, I'm like, I should have added that.
That's so cool. Even me, like I do consistently connecting with God, praying, reading the Word, but like sometimes you don't have the thought of like, this is a letter from God handed to me. To me. So man, that's a huge takeaway. Well, man, Adam, thanks again, it's been an honor to sit down with you. Thanks for taking the time, even like giving the message, but then being able to talk about it here today. It's really, I love getting to chat with you, and I hope one day I look like you one day. Lose my hair, grow a beard. It's going to be great.
Please, no.
I shouldn't wish that. I don't. I really don't. I was just trying to be nice.
No, thank you for this as well. This is every week. It's been really, really cool to hear. And I just had someone tell me this morning how much the message impacted them. It was just a simple message, but so powerful, whatever. And that's not me, that's God. And then said, and to know that I can dive deeper into some of the stuff with you with this episode and interview, that's just awesome. Like that I can listen to more if I want more and want to kind of dive to a deeper place. I can do that through this. So that's just an awesome opportunity, and so grateful for you, Jason, and just who you are and just the person you are, leader you are. God's using you in awesome ways.
Too kind. Way too kind. But
I do actually hope I look like you someday.
Grow the hair back.
That hair I'm so jealous of. It's crazy.
We can, right after this, we'll spend some time Googling some procedures.
That's perfect. Perfect.
But man, hey, be sure to, again, what Adam just said, like if you're looking for encouragement to dive into the message deeper, even hear the message we're talking about today itself, man, subscribe to the podcast. You can check us out on YouTube or imembrace.com. Subscribe on YouTube too. And man, if you're just looking for that encouragement, a message, some truth to help guide you, help encourage you to read the Word and connect with God, take a next step with Jesus, that's what all this is for. So be sure to subscribe to the podcast, check out this message at imembrace.com, and join us next Sunday, this is super exciting. I'm so pumped for this. We get to start a new series called The Greatest Story Ever Told.
Bam.
That's a big title.
That is a big title.
The greatest story. I've seen some Marvel Avengers movies that I'm like, that's a great story.
Yes.
Is it the greatest story ever told? I mean, I'm going to be told not now because
Yes.
this. And I'm pumped for it. Adam, do you want to give us a little insight into it? It's going to be amazing.
Yeah, so we're talking just about the overall story that we're told throughout the Bible, and more importantly, God's story. And it's creation. It's what is the four steps?
All right, so the four things are creation, the fall, redemption, and restoration. So that's the story of the Bible, of our story.
Do you have the breakdown of what the three phrases are around that?
The three phrases, I don't have them in front of me, but it was like the way it should be, the way it is, the way it ought to be, and the way it will be. I think that's it.
And so really the part, we did a staff talk last week, Waltner did, Travis, and he shared the heartbeat of it. And the part that was powerful for me was the difference between restoration and redemption. So restoration is right now, like God right now is redeeming things. Yeah. He's died on the cross. He's risen from the dead. He's able to redeem things. But there will be a time, but we still live in this broken world with our broken lives, with our broken marriages. So he's redeeming us, but we're still in the here and now. But there is going to come a time when he will fully restore all things. Wow. And he read the verses, there will be no more tears, like no more heartache, no more loss, no more brokenness. And just even, so my dad's had some health issues and he knows Jesus. He's already been redeemed. Yeah. But his body is failing him. His physical body is. And I just, in that moment of seeing my dad in the worst pain that I've seen him in a decade, I just began to think about, at some point, you're going to be fully restored. Wow. Like every part of you, every insecurity, and my dad's a wonderful man, so I don't see that part of him much, but every insecurity, every harm done to you is going to be totally restored. Wow. And not just like you spiritually, but also physically. And so I'm really excited. The image that we're using on the graphic, but also on stage, is this vase with beautiful flowers, and I think even that image, the four different stages of that, is going to be really, really powerful.
I think so too, and I it's kind of cool that we were so specific in this past series, looking at this Letters for You, Book of Colossians, what Paul's saying, but now we're zooming out. That's what it is. And we're looking at what is the story of the Bible, and not just that. What is the story of the Bible, aka God's story? What is your story? It's that correlation. It's that God's story is him working through you, through us, to be ultimately, I forget what pastor I heard say this before, but ultimately he just wants to be with his creation, God with us. Yes. And so we get to tell that story and see how all these times how God has always wanted to be with us, and that's always been his means, and that's the story, and then he'll ultimately be with us in the end. So man, I'm so pumped.
It's so good, and like what you said, like we just finished a series of zooming way in. Yes. And a lot of times if we're reading through the Bible, zooming really, really close in, we lose the bigger picture.
Yeah, if you don't see it, you can't see it. It's a podcast. He's making binoculars with his hands right now.
Yeah, it's like you zoom in so close to it, almost like a microscope, that you lose, like, what am I even looking at? Oh, I'm looking at this big picture. And so I think it's going to make it even more powerful when we do begin to go through the Bible in our own lives, or maybe we've been doing it. If we lose sight of the big picture, we can get off track really easy. And so I think this will be a great follow-up of, okay, now we know what it looks like to zoom in, but let's not forget the overall big picture of what God's doing.
Love it. So be sure to join us for that. Actually, our campus pastor, Brian, is kicking off the series, Brian Rock, and it's going to be a blast. It's going to be hilarious, but also super full of truth. And man, so get to a campus, iembrace.com. Well, you can find any of our campuses. I usually ask the campus pastor who's on there, who's giving the message, to give a shout out. But since it's Adam, we're just giving a shout out to all campuses.
We're just giving a shout out to all campuses.
No, I'll be specific. Let's, get to St. Croix campus. Get to 57th Street campus. I'll make sure there's a good space. Get to Sertoma campus. Get to T campus.
So weird.
I'm pausing so that way if someone wants to fast forward or, you know, that was weird. I'm sorry. Get to anyone on campus. More importantly, man, it's going to be great community, great purpose there. But yeah, that's all we got today. Adam, thanks for sitting down. We'll see you next week. Have a great week, guys. Bye.